This is sure to go down in history as my hottest take of the decade, so far at least, but I think that the Xeno games should be more anime. Before you all mass unsub though, I should probably explain what I mean by this and how it's probably different from what you're thinking, and then why the usual "the series has gotten too anime" argument for the games being worse is a bad one. Also, no spoilers in this video for the first time in I think a pretty long time, so that's nice. First off, and I'm amazed I still have to say this, calling something anime as a criticism is 120% meaningless. Anime is literally a blanket term for animation from a specific country, and covers more genres, formats, and styles of animation than I can count, so being anime or not means nothing because anime is so broad a term. Secondly, these are Japanese RPGs, so I don't know why you'd play a Japanese game if you didn't want to see anything resembling animation from that country, but anyway. Thirdly, Xeno has never got any more or less anime than it's always been. It's been unequivocally anime from the very beginning, if the whole getting production IG to make the animated cutscenes for Xenogears wasn't already an indication. A bit of a tangent though, but one thing I do think is actually pretty cool is how the art styles for the different games have evolved to keep up with the generalized anime look of the times. Xenogears was super mid to late 90s looking. Xenosaga, even though it had the same character designer, just changes in general aesthetic and art direction does make it look a bit more early 2000s. Xenoblade 1 effectively doesn't have an art style, so it doesn't really count, and X is also a bit of an outlier because it uses mostly renders for official art, and the official art that exists was drawn in several different styles, but most of the concept art looks on point for early 2010s, and if you think Xenoblade 2 doesn't scream mid-2010s with all of its heart, you clearly haven't seen any mid-2010s anime or played Xenoblade 2. Now, don't worry, I'm not so naive as to not know what people actually mean when they criticize later Xeno games by being anime or something. It is the way people who don't know how to criticize things say, "I don't like the art style and certain tropes used that are common in specific types of anime I don't like." And because apparently hopping on buzzword bandwagons is enough for people these days, they just go with saying anime because if everyone misses the point this hard, it doesn't really matter. You are allowed to not like Xenoblade 2 at Xenoblade 1 fans, or Xenoblade as a whole at Xenogears and Xenosaga fans, but if you're going to criticize the games in hopes the developers change things in a way you like next time, you should really learn how to articulate your complaints so it doesn't come off like you want Xenoblade to become a Western RPG or something. Just saying. Anyway, when I say I want the series to become more anime in the future, I don't mean to do the opposite of that criticism, I mean to embrace the anime that's already there and run further with it than ever before. So I'm just gonna go down a list of different things that can be done to make it more anime in a constructive way, instead of going along with the things a lot of people don't like. So, number 1, references. So far, outside of translations adding stuff to NPC dialogue, most shoutouts the series have made so far have been to mecha anime and various Western sci-fi series, be it books, movies, or the like. But there is nothing wrong with also making characters, objects, locations, attacks, or even just individual quotes a reference to something else. Most of the references so far have been integrated very well, they don't seem like they're popping out or were forced or anything, so I feel like referencing things in different genres, not even necessarily anime, just different stuff in general, would enhance the world as well by providing a wider scope, and while some people might not get the reference, having references can also act as a shorthand to help you better understand something without needing a huge amount of exposition. Next is character expressiveness. This is more of a medium of animation as a whole than anime thing, but if you make game characters look more like characters who are designed to look good in motion, you'll be able to make them look better in motion in the game. If we just take the Xenoblade 1 storyboard from the scene of meeting Ricky, and the scene where all the characters are looking at him in confusion, you get this. It's great, look at all the different expressions on people. And then you compare it to the actual game, yeah, there's a bit of a change there. Now, obviously, technical limitations are in play, and Xenoblade 2 did a lot better in terms of characters having different expressions and being able to show their emotions on their face, which is always a good thing, mind you. Having characters who can act outside of just their voice acting is only a good thing for how well the story is told. So, basically, I'm hoping Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition redoes the faces so they're more expressive, and we could see hints of that so far, and I hope that future games keep more of what Xenoblade 2 did, even if they have different art styles. I think a lot of people agree with me just on that point, and some might be a bit more contentious about the whole extremely exaggerated anime expressions like the white circle eyes or Nia's glowing eyes thing, but I feel like there's not really much to complain about if they're specifically saved for the comedic scenes, which they were even in Xenoblade 2, so I don't feel like that would be a big problem if they kept putting those in as well. The thing the art style and technical evolution of the series so far has been working for is basically to have the games look like a 3D anime made from the character designs, and it keeps getting closer every game. Also, you can't tell me battle animations weren't anime as hell since Xenogears, just throwing that out there too. Additionally, with the current level of tech, yeah, Switch is far from the most powerful console, but we got Xenoblade 2, so more stylized art styles might also be possible, and I think that would be pretty cool. Next, cutscene animation in general. We could see that Monolith Soft has some great animators, but we only get to see them go all out in either a fight scene or comedic scene a few times a game. I know budget and resource management are things, and I'm not saying that they should put everything into the animation and let the gameplay or something else fall to the wayside, but it'd be nice first off if they were able to have more animators. I know that's part of the whole budget thing, but if you get more animators, you could get more scenes at the highest quality. But anyway, it would be nice if it was possible to write the story, at least partially around the idea of we're going to have some scenes with very good animation in them. Now, I'm not saying touch combat animation, because yes, theoretically, combat animations could be animated better, but I don't want them to get to a style over substance approach to gameplay, because that is always bad, but if you want the cutscene animations to look better, why not make them better? I'm not saying they have to even be better than, say, Xenoblade 2, and Xenoblade 2 had some pretty low lows, but I think it would be cool. Now we move on to the big thing, the tropes. Tropes are obviously not a bad thing, and I'm not really going to talk about things that might be better off removed. I think people are relatively on the same page with, yeah, if we have to remove some things, like take the excessive fan service out, take some of Rex's denser moments out, we don't have to go with the dumbass shonen protagonist all the time, even though he isn't really that stupid. But anyway, the series will always end up drawing the most from mecha anime and shonen battle anime. The first is just obviously because of the prevalence of mechs in the story, and because it's the most commonly referenced thing, and the second is actually for a couple reasons. Obviously, the stories of Xenoblades 1 and 2 were specifically written to be similar to shonen manga or anime, but in addition to that, the structure of a typical shonen arc and a JRPG dungeon or story arc are also very, very similar. I actually have a video planned where I'm going to go through the arcs of the Xenoblade games and Xenogears, and you'll see that Xenogears basically follows the exact same arc structure as Xenoblades 1 and 2, despite not having been written as a shonen story. Although, low-key, Xenogears might be the most shonen out of all of them, it has 2 tournament arcs in the first 20 hours of the game, so what do I know? Most of the things I'm going to talk about aren't anime-specific, or even necessarily most well-known from anime, but they're prevalent in it, and would go to making the games feel more like anime while not decreasing the actual quality of the storytelling going on. First off is going into the tactics of major battles. We do get some big war scenes, there's at least one in a game, involving mostly fictional weapons, but very rarely do we get to learn the actual tactics at play, figure out what the commanders are planning and that stuff, and see how battle strategy would play out with all of these creative weapon types and things. It'd add a lot to world building if we got into the mind of the characters here, or at least learned what the strategy was through a character who is higher up in the chain of command, and it wouldn't take too much away from gameplay, since the party rarely fights on the macro scale in these battle sequences. Usually there's a few frontline fights, and then a boss or two, and you could still have the macro scale epic tactical combat going on, where the higher-ups consider the party as one of their most valuable pieces, and then the party just doing their most valuable piece thing, taking in either a ton of the fodder, or facing up against the enemy force's strongest people. Generally, more mecha porn, machine porn in general, not the sex kind, I said take away the excess fan service, but especially in X games, you've got all these cool mecha designs, show them off more. Definitely have more scenes of Skells fighting using weapons other than generic guns. Do some zoom-ins. If you're gonna make the models more detailed, like, flaunt that. More mech transformation sequences. The ones from Gears and Xenoblade X are great, so if they pull another Veltal and have the main mech have different forms again, I want to see it physically transform next time. Yeah. Have characters use arts in cutscenes more. In battle, we already have characters doing the classic calling your attacks thing, but never really in cutscenes. Xenoblade 2 did do this a bit, but not nearly as much as I would have liked. They usually just use them as bigger versions of normal attacks, which, like, yeah, I know, half of the special attacks in anime ever are just bigger normal attacks, but it would be cool to see cutscenes directed around the specific effects of characters' different arts. Think of how each Monado art in Xenoblade 1 had a scene that showed you its basic function before you actually got to use it in gameplay, but have scenes act as stealth tutorials for new ways to combine your character's abilities. Just think about how every Xenoblade protagonist so far, or at least Shulk, Elma, and Rex, have had a backslash-like art, but besides hinting towards the fact that Shulk shouldn't have the aggro in one cutscene in Xenoblade 1, we've never had any of the characters specifically try to get behind the opponent to use their attack that's one of their signature moves that does additional damage from the back. Just think about that a little bit, and you'll see what I mean. Have a more defined power system in-universe. Again, Xenoblade 2 did this, but it didn't go as far as I would have liked. I feel like a game where hard stat numbers are the name of the game when it comes to the gameplay could benefit from a harder magic system in-universe because it would better merge story and gameplay. Slice of life stuff. We really don't get enough of that. There are only a couple scenes of the characters just goofing off and being themselves outside the confines of the plot, or having to stop the next big bad guy every game, and more would be great. Especially because I feel like the character writing in individual moment-to-moment scenes has actually gotten better in Xenoblade X and 2 since, like, even going back through Xenogears and Xenosaga, so taking advantage of that would be pretty cool. After an arc finishes, don't start the next one right away. Make the characters want to explore the next area, but don't give them a reason to rush. I'm imagining a scenario where, alright, the arc finished, you beat the villain, they might have been connected to whoever the next big bad is, or the current big bad, or even the plot as a whole, doesn't really matter, but you save the town. You get your whole victory celebration thing, but maybe instead of heading out immediately, there's no rush. Yeah, your next goal, the next place you're going to, is the next town across the next major area, but you don't need to be there tomorrow. Take a few days in town, and then you can have the area, the cutscenes of an area, based around the characters actually exploring it, instead of just going from point A to point B. Think about it. One of the big claims to fame Xenoblade has is, wow, it's a JRPG that isn't linear like most JRPGs. The areas are huge and you can explore them and there's a ton of secrets and stuff to find and they're all awesome environment designs. But we never really have the characters mention that. There are so few cutscenes where people are like, hey yeah, let's go exploring around here. They're always like, cool, we arrived in a new area. Let's get to the place we're getting to at the other end of the area. So, if we just had the cutscenes for one area be about the characters seeing like, hey, that's a cool waterfall, or something like that, or, yo, let's cook out, have dinner, sleep out under the stars, by that rock formation or whatever. Have them be like, yeah, this place is cool, let's go explore it, instead of just the player wanting to do that. Again, puts the player in the character's shoes more, and merges the story and the gameplay. What about a protagonist with a goal other than just stop the bad guys? Even Shulk's goal was just stop the bad guys. Again, Xenoblade 2 did this, but it can be applicable to the non-shonen-like stories too. I guess this one's more Pokemon than anime as a whole, but friendly rival characters. Someone who's not necessarily antagonist, or evil at all, but someone who's working towards the same or a similar goal as one of the party members, or is even just going in the same direction as them, and has some fights with them because they want to test themselves. The moment where that character shows up late in the story to make a save in a tense time, and then joins the main group either temporarily or permanently, is one of my favorite things, and it would make a super organic late-game party member join completely possible. And then, the other big thing, I want Xenoblade 3 to have an OP. Lots of JRPGs have them, so it's not unusual. Every Xeno game already has an ED, so why not have both? Xenogears already almost had one, but it was scrapped, although I did actually take the footage and the song and edit them together to make it complete, and I use that as the intro for my Xenogears recaps, which you should definitely watch if you didn't understand any of the gear stuff I was talking about today. But if you don't like the typical anime OP, which is also kind of not really a thing, but usually when people say that they mean generic shonen type stuff, it doesn't have to be one of those. The song for Gears wasn't J-Rock, the lyrics were in English, so it can really be anything. Also, it would be a way to show off animation like I was talking about before. Now, this one has a caveat. It wouldn't be Monolith's animators most likely, because if I was in control, I would make them 2D animated. Mostly for the novelty of seeing these characters in 2D, because, yeah, models are good enough where you can just have the cutscenes completely in-engine, you don't need to pre-render anything, and there you go. But think about how we never got to see Xenogears characters in 3D. Xenosaga we did get 2D and 3D because of the unfortunately bad anime, but no Xenoblade characters have been in motion in both 2 and 3D, and I think it would be worth doing that, and not having Monolith animators do that just for the novelty of that, because I think it would be cool. Are you concerned about spoilers? As long as the identity of a party member isn't one, like in Xenoblade 1, it's very easy to not have any. Again, lots of JRPGs do it, so it's clearly a solvable issue. You can have later joining party members fighting generic enemies or early bosses instead of who they actually join around in the main story. Like, if important things happen before a character joins, you don't have to show that character fighting the enemy from when they join. They could be fighting a different enemy. You could also direct it to look ambiguous as to whether or not a character is in the party or not too. Or even better, just do more than one. Obviously only one of them would be the quote-unquote real OP of the game, since games are individual things, but having more things like them could set the stage for certain arcs of the plot. If they decide to keep going with chapters like they've been doing for the past 2 games, do one per chapter or one per couple chapters or something, because 10 OPs for Xenoblade 2 might be a bit too much. Bravely Second played its OP every chapter, and the only thing wrong with that was the fact that it used the same footage from the beginning of the game every time, and it hardly reflected the events currently happening after a few chapters. But either just have multiple OPs, or say, have 2 or 3 songs maybe, and just change up the footage every chapter so it's either a recap of what's already happened, or foreshadowing, or like, say, an actual OP if the next arc of the story was going to be an anime arc. In that case, you'd probably just want to use cutscene footage, since, you know, that would be a lot more money to have to pay the animators if they had to do stuff for every arc. But say, maybe 4 or 5 OPs throughout the entire game. That's less than 1 episode of anime, that's less than Xenogears had for all of its animated cutscenes, so it's possible. Better than avoiding spoilers altogether, though, would be hinting at the plot or various themes or future events through the design and direction of the OP, like all of the best anime openings do. Xenoblade 1 had some incredible foreshadowing, so I don't see why they couldn't apply that same talent on a much smaller scale but condensing much more story, and just have the opening tell the story of the game, but you wouldn't really get that unless you go back and watch it after you'd already played it. Overall, OPs would generally be a good way to set the stage for the game as a whole, or a new arc, or something happens that broadens the horizons or causes a tonal shift. And if they ever do direct sequels again, it would be a great shorthand for look how far we've come. I had this one incredibly specific idea for how to emotionally gut punch people as much as possible. And that's another thing. If anime tropes or anime anything can be employed in a good way to increase the emotional impact of these games, then do it. I want these games to make me feel things. I want them to make everyone feel things. If you have a dick, we're gonna punch you in it. If you have one and don't want it, we'll punch you twice. If you don't have one but want one, we'll give you one and then punch you in the face so we don't damage it this early. And if you don't have one and don't want one, I guess we'll also punch you in the face. But my very specific idea is, say they do a trilogy. Maybe they decided, okay, we trust Nintendo, we're gonna do direct sequels just this once again. We'll do a trilogy of games set in the same universe. And we'll have OPs, say 4 to 5 per game. The first one of the first game is obviously going to be extremely lighthearted. It's going to be the, oh yeah, we're going on an adventure type thing. And the gratuitous English in it, because of course there's going to be one, would be, now it is in our hands, so let's get out and dance. Well, it's just the characters like walking around or having fun exploring something. But then we cut forward to the third game, where big things have gone down, people have probably gone to space at some point. We're going through the universe trying to stop whoever's trying to misuse the power of the Zohar this time. And probably the second to last, and not the actual last OP, would be a reprisal of the original one, like a much more grandiose version, and then those gratuitous English lyrics are instead changed to, now it is in our hands, but this is our last dance. And if I had my way, this would also include past Xeno protagonists coming back, so they would all be in the shot when that happened, and everyone would cry, and it would be amazing. But yes, celebrating the anime influences that made Xeno what it is just another way the series can get even better in the future, and I hope that they do at least some of these in the next fully original game. This was a set of ideas, so implementing them all at once would probably be a bad idea. Ultimately, when I say make Xeno more anime, I mean this. A lot of people are always saying, yeah, they should totally make a Xenoblade anime, or I wish they made a Xenogears anime back in the day, or I wish the Xenosaga anime was better. But in reality, anime made to tell the story of JRPGs isn't always good. In fact, it's probably more often than not